comes down to this.
Hey everybody, Chance Burles here from Sheepdog Roundtable. I am just giving you a quick heads up. First off, I want to apologize for my voice right now. I'm a little sick. Secondly, we had some technical issues with this first roundtable, and I had Seb Lavoie on, who was just awesome, but unfortunately, right at the end, I realized that his video was not recording throughout the entire episode. So the video, as I've edited him out and I've edited the portions of us nodding and listening to him where you can't hear him, you'll see the video kind of jump around every once in a while, and you'll hear us reference him regularly. So just giving you guys a quick heads up on that, and I hope it doesn't affect the overall enjoyment of the show. I'll leave you to it. Enjoy.
Okay, so welcome everybody. This is my first live chat. We're going to be talking about some pretty awesome stuff today, and I got some absolutely outstanding guests. I am super excited for everyone to be here. First off, thank you guys. This is going to be epic, just in my mind at least. So I'm going to call on each one of you guys just to give me a little heads up, because some of you don't know each other, and I'm assuming there are people watching. They probably don't know everybody either. So let's start with Shaun. Can you give me a quick little rundown who you are, what you do, and yeah, go from there.
Sure can. Thanks, first of all, for having me on here, and hello to everyone that I haven't really got to know yet, but nice to see you all. My name's Shaun Taylor, and I am retired warrant officer from Canadian Army. I've been out of the military for quite some time in a number of different civilian careers. My last career that I just left was a high-performance race coach, which I did for 15 years. And now I'm currently seeing what shows up on my next path. That's me.
Sweet. Awesome. Thanks again for being here. Matt, how about you?
Well, 25-year veteran Canadian Armed Forces, combat engineer, now turned chef and finishing culinary school soon.
Boom. Talk about brevity. I love it. Grant?
Hey guys, it's great to see some familiar faces here and to meet some new ones. I'm Grant. I've been in the military for 3 years. In that time, I managed to squeak a deployment into Afghanistan, and there I currently work as a corrections officer on the front line, and I've been doing that for 13 years now. And as well, I also run this project here, this Honey Badger Alliance, and what that is, it's a mental health advocate group. It's more of a forward-moving initiative, leading by example. So a lot of the things that I put on there, I've learned the hard way, and a lot of the things I advocate, I will do myself, because I won't tell anybody to do anything else unless I'm doing it myself. So that's kind of basically what that's about, is setting a good example.
Wicked. All right.
Jon Archambault, military army veteran for 12 years. I did law enforcement for Calgary Police, and then I was diagnosed with mental health. So I started to work on my own self, and then wrote a book, and then tried to raise awareness on it. So I started that little Wired Differently to push more awareness, and actually to kill the stigma within the uniform.
Wicked. Awesome. Corey?
Hey everyone. So Corey Hatt here from Matther Industries, veteran-owned apparel company with mental health initiative and focus. And I do a few other things as well.
Couple, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So we're missing Chris. He's having some technical difficulties getting on here. I'm not sure. I didn't know how to fix them at the time. So we'll just move forward with 7 of us. I sent you guys an email last night, I think, or earlier today, with the general topic of what we're going to go over, and we're going to get into that in a second, unless anybody has any pressing business or questions they want to ask each other or get into before we dive in. Okay, so if there aren't any other pressing questions about people's height, we'll dive in. So I'm going to go into how I got started with this, and then I'll postulate where I'm sitting, and then I want to hear from all of you guys. So basically this got started. I was talking to my psychologist, and I was trying to get ideas for my podcast, and I was asking her, she works with a lot of veterans, what's the the common theme? What is the one thing that you see veterans struggle with once they're out? And she gave me a couple ideas, but the big one that stood out was the concept of mission men self. And that's something that we all push forward throughout the military, especially when you're in leadership. It's always the mission, then you take care of your men, and then you take care of yourself. One thing I found once I started talking to other veterans and started really expanding into the world is that we start to put, especially when we're out of the military, we don't have a mission anymore. We'll create one, and then we'll take care of our family, and then we'll find another mission, and then we'll take care of our family, and then we'll find another mission, and then and it just keeps going, and we'll forget about taking care of ourselves to the point either to the extreme case where people take their own lives, to the slightly less extreme case where it destroys your life, where you end up. We all know that movie trope of the 25-year detective with 2 divorces and crippling child support payments and blah, like you just work yourself to the bone for nothing. And I started thinking about, where does that concept come from? Where do we get this mission men self paradigm? Why is it so linear? And I started thinking to myself, well, if you take care of yourself, that enables you to take care of your men, which enables you to complete a mission. So why is it always that the mission is first when really we really need to take care of ourselves? But also, in that same paradigm, I also understand in combat situations, in terms of tactical requirements, absolutely the mission has to come first, right? You can't be looking out for yourself. When I was explaining this to a civilian earlier today, was that, when I was using a metal detector and clearing the road over in Afghanistan, I never once thought about myself. It was always about the people behind me. It was always about the ground in front of me. It was never me, right? The mission came first. So I understand why we need it. But I think it's more of a shifting, kind of like a Venn diagram, right? Everything blends into each other, and if it's done right, it all works. And then so I started getting on well, where do we go? What's the root cause of all of that? And really comes down, for me at least, was the concept of service before self, right? You always put what you're doing ahead of yourself in order to get that done. But I've also seen what that does to people, especially when you're outside the mission, or you're outside the society, or you're outside the, you leave the army, or you leave, even I've seen it from people that left the army, like infantry guys that went to the Air Force. And they're still in the military, but the way things are done is just so different that it can really send you on a downward spiral. So I'd like to hear from you guys, what your core understanding of what service before self is. And then we can carry on the conversation from there. At least to you. So who wants to dive in first?
Say Seb, because we didn't see him for
Well,
a while.
I don't mind
There we
speaking first if Seb doesn't want to go.
All right. Go ahead, Sean. It's on you.
Well, I think that from a general perspective, it's a matter of relying on what we've already been taught when we were being brought up in the military system. And that is, we were taught to act as proficient individuals within a team environment. And so I don't think the two are mutually exclusive in the sense of service and self. I think that you can act in a good direction for yourself so that you are growing and you're heading in a positive direction, while at the same time choosing something that is beneficial for a larger group around you. I'll use a good example of that, where when I left the military in '96, I left without any real direction or any guidance or any support system, if you will. And so I was looking around as to what I would do next, and I decided I'd go back to school, and then I jumped into computer system engineering. It's quite a story, but where that led me to was teaching day classes, night classes, and other things, where I was improving myself within a new industry, but at the same time teaching people who were on their last legs when it came to employment insurance, or they were new immigrants into the country who didn't have any direction to go. And so they would come into my class. I'd have 20, 30 people in a class and basically try to get them a foot up. I was really quite proud of that effort. Not only was I improving my own self, but I was raising a small team every 6 months of computer system engineers start out. And it was excellent. It was my first foray into the civilian world, where I realized that, you can take your skills and improve a team within that sort of strategic and tactical military sense. That's my answer.
Makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. I mean, the ability to look at it as a team environment versus just me and the men and me being separate things. They're all one piece. I think that's fantastic. Who's up next? Who else wants to dive in? Dun, dun, dun. There. No. Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, one of the things that I took very early in my career was I had a sergeant tell me it is our duty to question every order given. And it took me a long time to understand what that meant, right? But you're not supposed to question directly, but you should be at least thinking, why is this happening? Why am I being told this? Why? Absolutely, it's great. Anybody else want to attack on that?
So
Yeah,
I think
John?
it comes even further, right? It's part of your personality too, as well, right? I believe that when we do those jobs, we're givers, right? We care about the world, right? Because truly, like police, first responder, military, whatever it is may be, you don't work for yourself, right? You work to make sure that everyone is okay, is good to go. You don't know your stupid neighbor if he's stupid or not, right? But you still do it for that person. You still you still do your job, go overseas, and maybe go to a sacrifice for people who don't really care back home, right? We're still fighting for a divide or whatever that is. Same with first responder, right? They clock in for a 12-hour shift, 14 hours, whatever that is, if you have overtime, and you do it for a society who are first thing first, so hyped up to criticize, right? So that's number one. So I think that it's part of our personality to give, and this is what can be a really dangerous, right? Then second, it was just mentioned, right? Seb, you talked about management and leadership, which is two different worlds, right? The leadership is where you usually, right? You will die for your leader if he treats you well. Management, you might hate him as well. And this is where leadership doesn't come for everyone. And then we talked about it before, what comes as well with the service, right? And we all have been taught that. Now, when you leave the military, first responder, it's like you're leaving a boat or a car, a fast car that drives 200K an hour, and you stop. Because your buddies, your family, because I don't know for you guys, but the military for me was my family, still run 200K an hour. And they don't have necessarily the time to check on you, right? So there's a lot of things that comes and kind of you face the after and before, but I believe strongly that it's part of you to be like this first thing first, right? And yeah, if you forget yourself, it's the first mistake, because you should put yourself first before anything, right?
I got something.
I
got something I'd like to add to that, because it had me rethinking things just a touch. And so, John, you'd mentioned all of that, and I was thinking, well, geez, why did all of these guys get into the military? Looking at each one of you, I wouldn't want to guess the specific reason why each one of you got into the military, but I would make a general statement, and I think that it would be that all of us got into it for some form of patriotic duty of some form, for our country, for our town, for our family, for some sort of patriotism had to do with it. But I found myself, and I'm curious what your thoughts on it are, that over the years it became less about my patriotic duty and it became more about my duty for my fellow man, the guy who was standing next to me on my left and right. And so as the years went by and as I came to understand really why I was there, it was really for my fellow man, the person who was in that trench with me or whatever the case may be. And so in leaving the military, it then wasn't mostly for me about my country or patriotism or how I was going to serve my country again. I'd kind of evolved beyond that, and now I was just seeking ways to help my fellow man. So it was less about focusing on helping a large institutional mass. It was more about finding a way to help people who were within my arm's reach, I think. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. One of the reasons why I got into advocacy as a whole was at the time when I got out, I was looking at the veteran community and I was like, it's pretty, it can get pretty toxic. And I kept expecting this paragon, this tier 1 assaulter is going to come down from the hill and be like, all right, boys, this is the way forward. Everybody fucking shut the fuck up and follow me. Right? That's what I was expecting to happen. And I realized, like, that dude don't exist. As much as I want somebody else to take over and show me what to do, tell me what to do, I'm the only one here, and I'm the one noticing. So why the fuck am I not doing something, right? And then you start helping that guy, and then you're like, wow, okay, sweet. That guy, oh, that guy needs help too. I'm gonna help that guy, and you find those instant connections the same way we did in the uniform or anything else. I remember one of my things I say a lot to other vets is, you know, a lot of us wish we were back overseas, but we don't want to really be, like, nobody really wants to go back to the desert, right? That's not what we want. What we want is the feeling that everybody around us cares and would do basically anything for us at that point, right? It would just be, I could hate that guy over there, but he would take a bullet for me. No question. Right, and that's what we miss. So that makes total sense. Corey, Matt, Grant, do you want to jump in on what service force self means?
Yeah, I was gonna basically.
So we'll do Corey then Matt. Yeah, we'll do Corey then Matt. We'll be right with you, Matt. Sorry.
Yeah, so
Go
I
ahead.
was gonna add. The whole service before self, the concept of mission before man. I think what it shifts to when you get out, where it talks about doing your duty with respect, whether pleasant or unpleasant. What we do is now looking for that mission and chasing our passion, helping our fellow veteran out. We're doing that now in the community, and I think the commitment we go through life is doing the best we can and never looking back, continuing on with that mission, doing what we endeavor to help each other out. And those rewards come afterwards with the hard work. But you see a good example with what Jon is doing, you know, with Wired Differently, his mission, preaching mental health and advocacy. The mission before self continues on. It just kind of transitions into a different aspect of it. It could be a bad form where you're putting yourself to a detriment and punishing yourself and just getting more and more beat down. When you're doing too much, you're not looking out for yourself. So that mission before self needs to kind of change that concept where you're taking time to improve yourself and help each other, but also chase what it is that you're passionate about. A lot of veterans that get out, they're kind of aimless. And you mentioned the whole combat arms folks going into the Air Force when it's a change in direction and a shift in gears. That combat arms mentality may not be there, and sometimes it can be a little depressing for folks. And needing to refine that passion and mission is basically what we're all about here, right? We're looking to help inspire others, motivate them, and help them, and that's part of where I find when you get so ensconced in what it is that you're passionate about, you continue on with that mission. Not to the point where you're getting so beat down, like maybe when things were overseas, when you're going on your 6 months of patrolling nonstop. We're not talking about that. We're talking about longevity and long-term and what we can do to help each other out, all the other veterans out here doing the job and finding what they love and helping them along. That's really the mission, and that's where I think we're finding that veteran renaissance. So you have those missions like the Honey Badger Alliance, and those wired differently, and then you have Seven Shaun out in the bush, chopping wood, carrying water, being the silent ninjas.
Don't forget Matther
That's
Industry.
fantastic.
I heard that they do the same too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Jumping out of planes and
Designing shirts and dropping it all in one weekend.
by the way, I gotta say that new shirt you just dropped is awesome. Are you wearing that one right now? The samurai?
Matter of fact,
Be a monster.
I designed it last night and did the media just to push myself and see if I could do it in 24 hours. Turns out you can.
Nice, man.
Wicked. Yeah, it's
Fun. That was all inspiration from the Friday post and the Saturday post for the samurai. It just all came together.
that's just wicked. Yeah.
Available online.
There you go. Matt, what do you got?
Yeah, like going through the entire service thing for like so many years, it has always been mission self. And when you get out, the bubble's changed. Okay, it's everyone has kind of heard the term. It's a culture within a culture, being part of the armed forces. And when you get out of that culture, then where do we focus? Yep. Where do we go? Right, inside is really easy because you have your buds. Your buds are there. You take care of them. They can take care of you. But when you're out of that bubble and no one else is around you, has been that experience of watching you and you watch them and watching each other's backs, and everyone's more, turned towards themselves. It's I can totally see how a person getting out of the armed forces has to refocus themselves, where it's like, okay, I need to worry about myself first, then going on to helping someone else, right? Yeah, because we're such a small community. Like, there's only, numbers aside, I mean, the armed forces is a small community in general. And when we're put in position, like overseas or going on courses and stuff, you rely on the people around you really closely, really hard. But once you get out of the armed forces, or like even going from combat arms to like the Air Force, it's still within that bubble, but it's not. It's a bigger bubble versus what you're used to as a section level doing your thing, right? So it's kind of a mind shift to actually getting out of that isolation into a more broader aspect of the community. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Grant, you want to post it on?
Yeah, I'll come in on the ours end of her here. Shaun, I want to say I really like what you said there earlier, because that's pretty similar to my experience with things where, you want to do good things for other people, but there is that selfish component too. It's like, well, I want to make myself better while I'm still doing something in service of others, and I mean that just compounds, because as you learn new and better things yourself, you can then pass it on to other people as well and further strengthen the team. And I found too, once I get out of the infantry there, I was kind of lost for a couple of years, and then I did oil and gas, and then I was kind of missing something, so I found my way into corrections, and it was kind of enough just to feed the chemical itch there that I needed. And but it was the same experience where and based on just, I was listening to basically everything you guys were saying, and it's the same for me too, is we've already had our metal tested, and we've been around people, and we've had our brothers beside us that have had the same thing. So we want to see people, we want to make people around us strong. We want to make the entire team strong. And I think what has to happen there when we get out is we have to realize we're on a different battlefield, and so we have to change our tactics. I mean, we can't come across as maybe heavy-handed or hard-headed as some of our experiences we have, but we still have to figure out that language in order to cultivate that to wherever we find ourselves, because that's really, at the end of the day, what you want to do. And that ties in with that service before self thing, where you make your whole team stronger as a result, and then it forces you to keep leveling yourself up as well. It's just a perpetually feeding thing if we can kind of do it right and kind of keep the balance. And I know, like, me, just in this profession that I've been over the last 13 years, it was a very rough transition going from the military to this one, completely different. But I managed to figure it out and learn some lessons. And a big part of it was like with John, what you're saying, you're going 200 miles an hour. You got to definitely pump the brakes and kind of stop and look and see what the environment you're in there, and then just kind of readjust and go from there. And then same mission. So you just take that whole concept. If it's already hardwired and ingrained into us, why would you want to fight that? Take that and make that work for you. So it's like, okay, mission. What's the mission? Got to get my teammates up. Okay, so now the mission is all of a sudden if an incident happens, now we have better, more informed, or more tougher, stronger teammates to help us with the incident. Then we go back to the other mission. Let's get stronger again. What did we learn? What can we apply? What can we, just the after action debriefs, but then action those things and be like, all right, let's go and try these things. Let's play with these things. Let's test these things or whatever. So. Yeah, like it doesn't have to be a bad thing. Just understand you can make it into a perpetual machine that is going to make your whole team better, and that should be the goal of anywhere you go. Because it's like, especially if you're anywhere where lives are on the line or things matter or big things are at stake, it's like you want the opposition to be so terrified of you that they don't even want to dare to engage you. And if you have a team like that, then you've won. That comes back to that Sun Tzu quote about how if you can win without fighting, then that's the best type of victory, right? So. You see, and people watch too, right? It's like, well, these guys are hardcore. I don't want to fuck with those guys, kind of deal. So that's kind of my take on the whole thing in a very condensed nutshell.
Grant, that's the PG-13
That's fantastic.
show, so you're swearing words offend people here? Just
I guess I'm the one that I did break the seal on that one.
Not.
Sorry, guys.
It's not at all. Don't worry. We're good to go. It's funny that you mentioned that because it perfectly leads into what we're going to talk to. But I was just listening to a Jocko podcast, actually. I think I'm in 300 something. I don't remember where I'm at. Anyway, he was literally just talking about the time when he was driving around with the other SEALs in Iraq in their Humvees, and they had turned their seats outwards so that you're facing perpendicular to the way you're driving, except for the driver. And, the SEAL vehicles always have guns everywhere, right? And they're just pointed everywhere. And he was saying that, if I was an insurgent, I'm not taking those guys. Like, I'm not going to assault those guys because they're going to kill us. Whereas you see a buttoned-up Humvee and everything's locked and there's no one in the gunner's hatch. Yeah, we'll ambush those guys all day, right? And I think it goes to exactly to what you're saying is that if you have the presence of strength, just the presence of strength, you are going to mitigate a lot of the issues that you're going to engage in anyway. So in terms of mental health and in terms of bettering your team and bettering, those around you, again, if you just have that presence of like, everything's good to go, we're gonna carry on. This is what's gonna happen. It bleeds into everybody else, and that's what leadership is as a whole. But so the next point I wanted to get into is the team.
Sorry,
right?
Chance, can I just jump
No,
in?
go ahead.
And I got a question
by all
based on
means.
what Grant was talking about.
Giver.
Brought another thought to mind, and that is I think that probably as a group collectively, if we're given enough time, enough years, we would all figure out where we're supposed to be once we left the military. And that might take somebody a year, 10 years, 20 years. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Eventually it'll get figured out. And usually it turns out real well. But when you're leaving the military, I'm curious for each one of you how you calibrated once you got onto Civilian Street. For myself, one morning I was sitting at my desk doing an unusual job, and then that afternoon I was driving towards my new civilian lifestyle. And that calibration took some time. And if I figured it out, it was only by luck. It certainly wasn't because I had it all figured out super quick. So looking at all of you, I'd just be curious if each one of you could just give me like a 30-second soundbite on how you calibrated, if that's okay.
Well, I can go if you want. I don't mind.
Giver.
I released on 2016. I think the 5th September, I was military, and the 6th, I was police. I did not adapt. It took a long time, and honesty is not, blunt honesty is not appreciated in civilian life, which I learned, and I got in trouble often. Like the casual thing, right? We used to wear a uniform, you shut up, you put your boots on, you have to just look like it's supposed to be, and you show up on time, and there's no reason that your mommy didn't make your breakfast or whatever. I did not. Personally, I got in trouble a few times for saying, shut the fuck up. Like, just own your crap and shut the fuck up. right? And sadly, I'm still at that same point, right? But to link this with, I think it's Corey. Corey was saying different, or we're talking about different culture, or Matthew, I'm not sure. Anyways, it's a different world. We are in a different world, and we're adapting to another world, right? And then it becomes your life for X amount of time, and then you go back to something that is different. I think there's an adaptation that has to be done by us as veterans, going back to civilian life, and to the civilian as well. We don't need to be fixed because we think differently, right? We need to be accepted and maybe heard, right? Because you think a certain way, you go to the U.S., you're fine because they are so patriotic towards their uniform. And here, it's not always the case, right? Like, it depends on the province. I got spat on wearing my uniform in Quebec, right? Versus I got my hand shook in Ontario and in Alberta, right? So I think the adaptation has to be made, and people have been to be aware that we are okay still, not because we're not thinking the same way. We're not broken. We're just, this is as a result of our service, which is fine, right? So I think there's something there that has to be done on both hands, which sadly we don't have any explanation how to adapt, right? So they teach us how to wear our uniform, they don't teach us how to remove it. I know there's a course of 4 hours PowerPoint that we die on it, where they tell you this is where you can ask for help and whatnot, but it doesn't do anything, right? Because it's your way of living for X amount of time. So no, I personally did not adapt, and I think as of today, my wife would say probably the same, right? I don't mind. I don't want to change. There's nothing wrong. That's it. My rent.
Yeah, that's a good point. Who else wants to go next?
Yeah, I'm not going to change. Like, I got out of the forces. I'm still forces in my blood, and I'll bring that to every job, every opportunity, every task I do. There's always that fallback, because like, that's 25 years of experience. I'm not just going to throw away. We talked about that in the podcast, like how evolution is in a transitioning, right? What I've learned and what I'm going to make my next step better. And then once I've learned or failed from that step, I'm going to go to the next step and make that better, and so on and so on. So I'm bringing all this baggage with me because I earned it, and no one can take that away from me. That's my thought.
Absolutely.
Jon and I, we talked with this. I'll get to this first, and I'll just get to where my transitionary point was there as well. But Jon and I, we talked with this before, and I come up with a little new way to describe it. So when we go back into society, we have a lot of problems because we're made aware of more of the world and more of the potential bad things that are out in the world, and just different ways of life. And so the thing that we have to realize when we're talking to people and they come across as like naive or silly or whatever, it's the equivalent of if you have a grade 12 level math class and you go into like a grade 3 one and you're watching people struggle with their problems at their level. It's like, well, why should they do this? Because we have to understand that we are aware of and we know more. And so to agree, we kind of have to be, I think, a little bit less judgmental that way. And you can there's either two ways you can go at it positively. You can choose to accept it and leave it at that and let it go, or depending on what the circumstance is, just bring people up to speed a little bit more. Hey, you know what, maybe consider this or this, because I've seen people and they do act like this or this. And I found that goes a long way, especially now in the job where I'm at, taking on more of a bit of a mentor role, because it sounds weird to say this, but I'm one of the more senior people there now, and so we get lots of junior guys through, and it is very much so easier to get the information across when you tell them, hey, consider this and consider that, and just know that they're not going to have all the answers. They're going to fuck things up here and there, and that's okay too. It's just the idea is you have to learn as long as it's not too critical, and people are very appreciative of that, and I think that goes a long way. It's very easy just to come across with the old, with the fear mongering and shoving it down someone's throat, but no one wants to hear that. Nobody gives a shit. That's what I found. So it's, a better way to pivot with get your point across the same way, but just, get the same point across, but just with different language. And I found that really works pretty well. As far as transitioning from where I get into the military to where I went now, this is going to sound completely ridiculous, but I forced got my way into everything that I've had come along. I was just, when I got into the military, I was home for a year. It kind of took me a year though, like where I couldn't look at people. I was just me and the dog for about a year or so. That was kind of a bit rough getting over it. And finally, at the year, just something clicked, and I was like, okay, I want to do something. So I was like, oh, I'll just go somewhere familiar, I'll go with the boys. Some of them were working in the oil and gas, so I had this opportunity presented to me. I'm like, I didn't even put a second thought into it. I'm like, I'm just going to go. I'm going to figure it out. If everybody else figured it out, I should be able to figure it out, and so I did. And then whenever the economy looked like it was going to hell in 2009 there, a lot of the people that worked in the company that I worked in, they were firing the ones that were making better, and they were into the management positions. I'm like, well, if that's my reward for working in an occupation like this, I don't want it. So at the time, it was either fire, corrections, or I think there was something else. And I was like, oh, I haven't tried that. Let's just try that. Let's see if it looks like on TV, and that's about as much thought as I put into it. And that was 13 years ago, and still here. And I've learned so much. It's made so many more things in life easier when you deal with people like that day in and day out. You learn an awful lot. And again, it was, like I said, it took a big transition and a big pivot on how I ran operations, because that was rough for the first probably 2 years there until I kind of figured that out. It took a few more for it to level off, and then I started this project. But yeah, that's kind of what it was for me.
Do you regret not going firefighter and sleeping
Seb?
at night?
Well, I don't know, man. It's like I could have went to a computer college, or I could have went to the infantry. I'd still pick the infantry every day, because it's like, well, I'm not I would not change that experience for the world. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Could have been semi-retired with fire 7 days a month, isn't
I
it?
have no idea. Yeah. Is that what it is, John?
So they work 24-hour shift in Alberta,
life.
and then they have 3 days off, and then another 24-hour shift and 4 days off. They work 8 days.
But the thing is, though, I can't grow the mustache and the chest hair good enough to get on them calendars, though. So that was out right there, just at that.
That's Super Trooper, man. Yeah. That's not the same.
I can see where that would. Yeah. Corey, got any points to add?
I don't know what I could add to that. That's really on point. Seb, as clear as
Nailed it.
yeah, as clear as you can cut through water. For me, exact same story. So I actually had 2 instances where I was getting out of the forces. I'm actually still in, but from going for my first full-time tour, went over to Blackwater, ended up doing some private contracting in the Caribbean for a few years, started my own company. So things really didn't slow down. It actually spiraled out of control and then got busier and busier. And then in between that, I ended up getting back in and doing another tour. Wasn't fully out. And then the second tour, after getting injured, immediately got onto the team. So as soon as I was able to run again, that's the exact same principle. So Seb talks about dialing up your character once you find out what you're really made of, what you can tap into, that inner beast. That's where I found the ability to push through. Despite not being fully rehabilitated, I was still able to make it on the teams, where I was there for 6 years and then transitioned to the scientist role I'm in now. But I think for those getting out, the big key is finding your new mission, and then dialing down that intensity is something I think takes a long time. For me, dealing with the issues that I had, but just dealing with normal everyday people, I had a hard time not really just cutting through the bullshit or just being a little too intense. Now I can kind of regulate that a lot better. Maybe it's a maturity thing or it comes with experience, but I think that's a really common issue for a lot of folks on the operational side. How can they transition and also find their new mission? And, well, you know, Shaun, as you were saying, as you're planning towards that, you'd think with all these years and experience, you'd be ready. But a lot of people aren't when it comes to full stop. They haven't prepared for what it is that's going to continue to define them. So not letting the uniform be all that you are, or the mission, finding your own inner passion is really the key to that, and being able to continue on and looking for other ways to help others. So that mission before self, although it changes, I think that's a really big key there that helps people to move on and continue forward doing something different, albeit at a different tempo. But it's nice to dial up that inner savage when you need to and tap into it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's not much I can add to that, but my personal experience getting out was the opposite of basically everybody here. I got out and I just spent a year trying to work with my psychologist, trying to get better, and he made me worse. And then I eventually, I think it was a buddy of mine, can't remember who I was talking to. I was just like, man, this guy sucks, and I just every day I dread being there. I don't want to do this, blah blah blah. And he's like, you can just go somewhere else, right? It's like, what? Oh shit. Okay, yeah. And then I immediately started looking at like trauma specialists and so on and so forth, to try and make myself better. But I just said, okay, well, if I saw this one, my psychologist that I see now, and she's made me a lot better. But I immediately went like, oh, I'm getting better. Excellent. I'm going to go to school. And oh man, that was not smart. I went from being Master Corporal Burles in Meaford, right? Like I was an instructor. I told people what to do. I was teaching people. There was knife hands flying everywhere. To I now have an 8-month-old son, or like a 12-month-old son, whatever. I'm not doing the math, but who doesn't do what I tell him when I tell him to do it, right? And I don't know how to bring that back. And then I go to school and I'm surrounded by 19-year-old girls who are on their phone all the time, and I can't fucking hear the lesson because my hearing aids are picking up their fucking and I'm just wandering around like, there's no fucking control. Why does no one have any fucking control? So I had a very challenging exit up until the point that I realized that I was like, what do I want to do? And I wanted to still look after the boys, and that was just always my goal. As you said earlier, Shaun, it does transition. I have this picture of myself when I was 4, and I was wearing like an OD shirt, like an OD sweater, that said Army across the front. And that was, I wanted to be a soldier my whole life. And then getting out was a whole nother ball of wax. But trying to figure out who I was after that, being like, now what? So I wanted to now, it slowly morphed into, instead of just wanting to serve the nation, wanting to be a soldier, wanting to do this, it was about, that guy needs help. I'm going to go help that guy. And then I'm going to go help that guy. And then I'm going to go help that guy. And it became very challenging because, again, I just wore myself out. I was like, okay, I'm going to go to school. And then I'm going to have a ranch. And then I'm going to have horses. And I'm going to have this. And I'm going to work these. And I got this. And blah, 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 and all these plans start. I'm going 100 miles an hour. And really what you need to do is just like, as you said, pump the brakes. Like, take a fucking second. Look around. Figure out what needs to happen. And then make it happen. And just the timeline, I think, is the biggest one for us, is that, especially for me especially, was that I'm not giving myself the timeline necessary, right? It is possible. If I really wanted to and said, okay, tomorrow I'm going to start talking to investors, and I'm going to find money, and I'm going to get this ranch, and I'm going to do these things, and blah, 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 and then within 1 year I'm going to have this thing open. That's technically possible. There's no reason that can't get done. But what am I giving up in order to do that? Right? That's going to be a 24-hour job just to get there. And then once you're there, you have to give up more time to do these things and so on and so forth. But I also have 2 kids, and I got a family, right? I want to be able to do other things. I want to be able to go and shoot. I want to be able to do podcasts. I want to be able to, go to the gym. I want to be able to do jiu-jitsu. All those things take time. And so when you don't give yourself that proper distance, and I said it to a couple of people, but Corey, I remember talking to you, I was like, the distance doesn't define the journey, right? It's not about how long it takes to get there. It's not about whether it's a year or 10 years or 15. It's about getting there. And just to add a little point onto this, I learned this in jiu-jitsu a little while ago, was that when we're drilling, my professor says this all the time, when we're drilling, it's like, you don't need to get the move for you to, when you're drilling, to understand the principle, right? You go from, if the whole sequence is to get out of someone's guard, pass the guard, move into side control, and do an Americana, and you guys start live drilling, if you can get out of the guard in that 30 seconds, in that 40-second drill session, good, right? You've increased your odds for the next. Doesn't mean you didn't work. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just means you needed more time, and that's something that we need to learn, especially as veterans, when we get out, is like, give yourself the time. If it takes 10 years for you to get better, guess what? You're better.
Actually,
so what? It took 10
it'll
years.
take more than time. It's going to take a whole pile of failures. And here's a super interesting thing that I've learned after several industry careers, is in the military, You know, if you're on the hard path, you're going to face a lot of failures. If on a particular course, you might fail 10 times a day when normally you never fail. But within the military context, it's almost expected that you're going to have multiple failure points throughout a course timeline. And then when you're off course, when you're working with the guys, you'll have multiple failures. And really, I think throughout the years, most of us are just trying to do the best that we can to fail less and carry on with the mission, etc. And that's all good because it's in a single pipeline, the military pipeline. And it's all understandable because that's the pipeline we stay in. But as soon as you move out onto civilian street, and I should be careful to delineate between a younger soldier and a more experienced soldier, what they will face on civilian street will be a little bit different. But that transition for someone who's failed a lot in the military is a little easier than someone who hasn't failed a lot in the military. But what is key is once you're out onto civilian street, you only assign your success value to that particular, okay, I've just got to get that cubicle, or I've got to get that corner office, or I've got to get next to the printer, or if I could just get a bit closer to the water cooler. Whatever small goals you set for yourself, when you have failures in that new industry, you really don't have a calibration point. You don't have that baseline that you would get in the military built up over years. Failures become okay in the military because it becomes the norm. But failures out on civilian street aren't quite as normal. And it can cause a lot of friction, I think, if you hang on to your successes in the civilian street just a little too hard. For myself, I've failed so many times on civilian street. I feel like I'm now back in the military. I've failed that many times. But it's good. It's good. Right about the time that I started to feel pretty good about my identity in whatever industry it was, I was keen to move into the next one to kind of tie that philosophical white belt on again, start failing again. And I think it's something that's not talked about very much, that when you get out onto civilian street, for sure, you're going to have a boatload of failures. Maybe years until you either figure out how to do it better or you figure out how to move along into the next industry or the next mission, next task.
What about accepting the failure, right? That's another one too, because you've got to accept it.
Well, it's super
right?
hard.
Yeah.
But I think
it's super hard.
And I think, and what you've spoken about, and I believe it's Corey, we're talking about the mission. Like, what would be the mission as well, because the problem with us is the mission, we're going to fulfill it. That it takes a year, 2 years, 5 years, it's gonna happen, right? We've been trained that way. We've been re-educated, rewired, whatever you want to call it. But should not be our first mission realizing who we are again. Because I was talking to my occupational therapist, and she told me, she's like, I will never ask again a veteran, can you do that? Because he will never tell me no, right? So if you have to, let's say I have issue going to do my grocery, right? Stupid question, but stupid thing, but it happens, right? And my occupational therapist will say, can you do it? I'll say yes. I'm gonna shut down every feelings that are happening. This is disconnected. That's gonna work. Get my apples, get my onions, walk out. It's done. Then I'm a trigger, because then that reconnect after, right? So is it our first mission to actually adjust back to who we are with that background that we've had, right? But with our self-identity as well, right? Because quite often the self-identity goes away because we become the military, right? Or we become the police, or we become whatever it is, right? Because you have the same thing in police. I've seen it where, and my wife still tell me, this is fucking, he's driving, he's not allowed to do this, he's fucking not, and I see all the freaking traffic code in my head. I still do it. Or I drove in Regina, which I've never been in my life, and I saw elder 50 years old man on a BMX. In my head, he's a drug dealer, because hell, in town here, I've seen them as a drug dealer, right? So is it the fact that we need to readapt to who we are as a self-identity should be our first mission, if it's not there yet, right? I'd be curious.
Yeah.
No. Well, I didn't know it. Oh, come on. Give me a break.
That's a
here.
problem for me.
Give me a break here.
I'm 8 years over the elder.
See, I would have given you 27 years old. There we go. And that's because of the background, obviously. But no. But like you do an association, right? And it's this is where I'm wondering if there's the first mission should be to readapt, right? To readapt to who we are as a person.
Oh. Yeah. And
But that's why you have a pen, no? You take notes.
No worries.
While we talk. But you have. Okay.
No. Yeah. Gotta spin it every once in a while, right? Just give yourself a fidget spinner or something and spin it around. Yeah, I was gonna say, that a great point, John, is the fact that we make soldiers, right? We make policemen, we make firemen, and it really reminded me of I had this thing because I was the marker. I'm a big guy. I've always been the marker in any sort of drill situation, and I took that on as a point of pride, right? That was like, I am going to be, okay, fine, you want to be a marker? I'm going to be the fucking marker, right? And the really interesting thing was that I would have a face. I would just turn it on. I'd be like, okay, drill time, right? And you go, boom. And I have to look forward. Everyone else is doing eyes right and stuff like that. I'm just, bang, I'm centered on this guy. And I realized that my drill face was the face I made when I did stuff like that, right? You got to go to the grocery store and you're like, okay, turn it off. Boom. And you just go. And you're 100% right. We need something that we can teach people how to not be a soldier, basically. And I was talking with Mark Campbell a while back, and we were saying that, the key is to have an out camp. We have a boot camp when you get in, right, to teach you how to do all these things, and I'm going to teach you how to tie your shoelaces because you don't fucking know, right? To having an out camp where they literally sit there and go, you know what, man, tie your shoelaces however you want, right? Just, and step by step, you could run it at. I was talking with I think Toby with this, was that we could have like camps running on the bases, right? You could have 2-3 veteran dudes who've been out for a little while, attached with a VA person, and not like a JPSU where they just get sent, right? You're off, gone, bye-bye. But to an actual location, they have timings, they have actual classes they have to take. There's it's an actual course. This is your out course. You're going to be taking it for the next 2 months. You're assigned to this person, blah, 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 and off you go. And then you show up to work that next day like you would normally, surrounded by other guys that are getting out at the same time, and then, teach them how to do things. This is how you find a doctor. This is how you find, a tax representative. This is where you need to go, blah, 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 blah. And for some people, like you said, when you're, Shaun, you were saying earlier that, senior people, when they get out, from my experience, usually have a better time transitioning out because A, they're used to being in charge, and B, they're used to doing lots of paperwork. They have admin stuff to do, right? You're constantly doing admin. You got to send this guy in here, do that. Matt and I think we're talking about that as well on our podcast. And you take a brand new private, say he's in for 3 years. Let's use an actual example. You take someone, joins the infantry, goes to Afghanistan, loses a leg. Now he's out of the army. He's been in the army for like a year and a half. He's 19. You just gave him a shit ton of money, said, see you later. What do you fucking think's going to happen? Like, really? Like, what do you think's going to happen, right? If he's really smart, he might buy a house. He might, do whatever. A lot of times it goes negatively the other way. But if you had an actual out camp, something that someone had to show up for every day, okay, here we go, do this, blah, blah, blah. And oh, this is how taxes work. Oh, okay, this makes a lot more sense. And then you can actually teach people.
So
what that does.
So quick question. Does that already exist yet or not?
Actually, it does.
No.
It does.
And so
there's two vets in BC that build up a project for this. Now they approach
Okay.
D&D
Good.
for it, but I think right now it's still on the private side. And I know as well, US does it where they open it to Canadian as well. So we have access to something similar.
Yeah.
But should our, and I'm going to let you go, Shaun, after 2 seconds. I just have that stupid thought. But so we have to do our part. And I totally agree with you with this. Should somehow, because we need to teach as well people that whatever you learn in the last time that you serve, if it's 20-some years old, 3 years or whatnot, will never be recognized in our country. Because that's another fact. Whatever you've done, most of the job do not recognize it. They recognize it as, oh, you'll show up on time, you'll give your time, whatever it is, right? But what I faced personally in the last 4 years, whatever I learned there is not recognized. And I've been told that in court, which was extremely insulting, right? So is there a part in this that we have to do as veteran, but is there a part that as well has to be done, not necessarily civilian, right? Because it's not at a civilian level, but society, right? Like, or do you have to go back? Because I mean, whatever the trade may be in communication, it was research for 5 years. It's not recognized, right? So I have to do equivalency, still have to go back to school because that part was not granted as real school, but it's given by government. So is there something as well, a bridge that has to be done on both sides, right? There's something there to look at.
Yeah. That's what I was talking about, was the fact that it should be a military program, right? You're getting into the military. It's now the military's responsibility to get you out. Absolutely, it should be. And it should be accompanied by veterans. It should be people that have been out, that have been there, that have been doing this. Peer support is so important throughout all of everything, right? And that's how we live in the military, is peer support. Now you're getting out and you're just, especially Canada, man. Like we get somebody that leaves Petawawa and they're from fucking Flin Flon, Manitoba. What kind of military presence is there, right? Basically none. Some vets here and there, maybe a Legion, but that's it. These guys are now just sent off to wherever. I'm complaining a bit right now, but I think there's something that we could create and have the D&D embrace it and say, absolutely. And what I was going to say was that it behooves the nation to do so, because we have a greatest generation, right? We have an entire generation of people who came back from World War II that built the nation we live in. We now have the capability to do that with all of the vets from Afghanistan and everything we've learned and all the skill sets we have. We should be giving solid, good working citizens back to the country, rather than the trope of the broken veteran or the guy that's angry all the time, or the really intense dude that no one wants to talk to, right? Instead of those tropes being there, they should be something of, oh wow, this guy served in the army, cool, he's our best worker, this is awesome, he does great work, he's loved by everybody. You know what, when my kid gets older, maybe I should get him to join the army, right? It's a self-cycling self-benefiting cycle if you provide the nation with a really good example of what the military can accomplish. That next generation wants to be a part of it, and then that betters the system, and it just keeps cycling better. Sorry, yeah, Shaun, did you have a point on that? Or?
Well, I'm just curious that if I took myself as an example and thought, 35-year-old Shaun is going to go back and sort out 35-year-old Shaun, that wouldn't have gone very well. I just didn't have the maturity. I didn't have the wisdom. I really didn't actually know how Civilian Street worked. That took a long time. And so it's only just now, as I've been ratted out by my friend Seb, I'm over 50. As I'm only just learning now that I'm probably old enough or have just a little bit enough wisdom to say to myself, man, I wish I could go back and talk to 35-year-old Shaun and give some good advice that I was completely unaware of at that 35-year-old time. And so it makes me think a little more cautiously about the proposition of, a bunch of veterans kind of sitting down with a bunch of young guys and saying, hey, this is how it works, because I couldn't have done it at 35. I couldn't have passed on good information to some young fellas coming up or about to get out. I just didn't know enough myself. So I think there's probably a careful line between a service to people who are getting out, more carefully vetted, and probably a little more structured, formally structured somehow, so that people who would be passing on that information are a little bit wiser than I was when I was 35, 40, 45 kind of thing.
For sure. Yeah. No, that it actually leads directly back into what I wanted to get onto next. Is that when the team wins, everyone wins, right? And yet, it's led as you said, the military. We train people to go to war, right? Just you're getting trained to go to war, and then once you're done with that, you're being dumped off to the side, or you get some posting somewhere else or whatever. Once the war is over, it's no longer whatever, and we see this a lot too, right? The hard chargers, the guys that wanted to fucking go and fight and do the job and like, let's get this fucking on. Those people, once Afghanistan was over, were slowly pushed off to the side, right? And it was just like, you know what? We don't really need you anymore, but you do need those people. And that you're basically you're taking advantage of their drive, of their desire to do these things. And what I'm going to ask is, how do we change the institution to see that it's more important to work as the team, to work forward so we all win, instead of just him winning, or this guy getting that promotion, or this guy fucking getting the check in the box, or whatever? How do we get the institutions to see, police, fire, you name it? I've heard the same story across the board in first responding environments, is that once you're done, you're just done, right? You're, okay, that guy's gone, move on, carry on. And I get it, like there's a machine, right? The military is a machine. You got to keep moving. There's lots of stuff to do. But to just drop people off like that, it always seems mind-boggling. You're just tossing years of experience, and one of the things that really tripped me out was the universality of service issue, right? Like if you get injured, you can't work in the military anymore. Well, why the fuck not? Why can't I work clerical stuff? Why can't I work fucking in the RQ? Why can't I do something but just stay? I don't have to be one of the fucking dudes up front. I can still work though. And yet we just peace out, have fun. So how do we change that institutionally?
I don't think you're ever going to change the institution. All you can do is change yourself and change the tact towards the problem that you've just described, because ultimately you're the only one who has control of that immediate environment. And so I would suggest this, that for the individuals who were set off to the side or placed out of the way for whatever reason, they're still good to go. They've still got all of those skills. However many years they developed those particular skills, they're still in place. And so if that individual is set aside, they can carry on successfully. They'll find a way. Now, as for the institution, for sure the institution loses that intellectual knowledge, that corporate knowledge, if you will, but it will be replaced. But the individual, which is what we're talking about, is going to get to carry on successfully. And guess what? Now they're in a new environment, a new location, a new task, a new industry, whatever the case is. And they're rising up the boats around them because of that strong foundational skill set. So I see it as less of an issue. You can't change the institution, but the individual can just reprioritize or redefine what's important, and that is for them to get on being successful.
Yeah, I like what Shaun said. I don't think it's the institution that we're getting out of the institution that's where we should be really focusing on, because that is a small aspect of things. But society in general too, and this kind of goes back to the original point where you got this gunfighter, well-trained dude. He gets out and he's got all these soft skills, but they're not certified for anything. Like, civilian workplace doesn't recognize them. We need to educate that aspect, the bigger bubble, that when you are getting somebody out of the military, and even if it's like Private Number 3 who spent 3 years in service, he's bringing all these aspects into that new occupation, new career. That has to be welcomed more than just, oh, this is a veteran, we're making our quota, check the mark, he can work on, dishes number 3, whatever. So I think we think bigger, not just like the institution we're getting out, but think bigger about the institution we're getting into, right?
Yeah, it's super tough. I mean, I faced it myself. When I got out on Civilian Street, there was no clear path in front of me. I just forged my own way through really hard work. And so to that point, the individual, if they're competent and capable and they were brought up in a system that teaches you how to stay focused and disciplined and work hard, no matter what's in front of you, you'll be successful. And so if you get out onto this civilian side of things, even though there isn't a clear-cut path in front of you, you just got to do what you already know how to do, and that is be disciplined, focused, and work through the adversity. And man, it can take years. It's not just days or weeks or months, years, decades to start to see some kind of self-satisfying satisfaction. But man, it's a grind. It's just like getting back into basic training. You got to grind your way through basic, and then you grind your way through the service, and eventually you start becoming competent in certain skills, and then you're off to the races. Well, the same thing on Civilian Street, except you've already got a boatload of skills inside of you. You've just got to learn how to apply that within that new environment. I don't see it as a particularly difficult thing to do other than that calibration in that new civilian world. It's the calibration, as I see it, that is the trick, not the individual's hard work ethic or focus or discipline. It's the calibration that is the trick, in my opinion.
I think, again, it's not...
Yeah.
I think what...
Yeah.
Oh, sorry,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think, John, we talked with this. I talked with someone with this before, exactly what you were saying there, Seb, is, whatever image or whatever crest you decide to stand behind, you make that crest, not, like you're saying, someone else. And I've said this too. It's like, you can say this and you can say that, but at the end of the day, what am I doing when I put that uniform on? How do my actions dictate? My actions dictate how that service or entity that I work on behalf of is represented. So, it's interesting. It's a very contagious thing whenever you start to see that. Whenever you do things the proper way, where it's like, no, you know what? I'm taking ownership for all my own shit, all my failures and all my victories. You can do things in a more positive way, and you get better results, and it will start attracting people. And you're right, you don't have to get them all. And whenever you're saying that, I was like, it's like a very, very similar experience over the course. It took a long time. It took probably 8 years to get to where it is now. And like, I've been working kind of in the same place, so it's nice. You could see it change over the years from the one same consistent place. But if you are willing to put your nose to the grindstone and you want to make whatever it is your reality, good or bad, you will get it one way or another. So it was really cool to hear that from your side, because it's like a very similar experience at our place as well, just to reinforce that, like, you make that image what it is, right? I think that's what they were talking about, John, like, just the overall, like, what you make the entity you work for.
So super interesting thing
right.
that I'd like to mention is
by all means,
just listening to everyone chat on this particular subject. An observation of mine is, for myself and others, is you can be competent in the military. You can work really hard. You can kind of move towards that tip of the spear, and within the organization, generally speaking, you have some form of recognition. Your peers around you will recognize that new patch that you've got on your shoulder, or the task that you just went off on or came back from. There's recognition within the organization, but as soon as you get out onto Civilian Street, no one really knows what you're about, and generally speaking, you don't know what you're about within the civilian world for a little while. And so it's kind of a bit of an isolating place in the sense of no one around you understands what you have done or did or were or are. And for me, I relied on that classic sort of deeds, not words sort of mentality where I just kept working hard, work. And almost in the absence of recognition is where it starts to become difficult because you're not part of a feedback loop at all. You're just working and no one's correcting you. No one's saying, hey, move left, move right, up or down. You just work hard as best you can without a lot of input. And it takes quite a few years to kind of be comfortable in that environment, I found. I'd be curious as to what you guys thought for those first 1 or 2 years where you were working hard, perhaps, but in isolation.
Anybody want to take that first? No? Okay, I'll jump in. So the question is, you're asking what we did that moment, that first year of isolation when we got out? Is that what you're asking?
I'm saying that within the institution called the military, we are supported by a bunch of guys and girls who know what we're about. If you've got a patch on your shoulder, they immediately know who you are and what you've done and how you got to be there. There are no patches out on Civilian Street to say you are X, Y, Z. Mind you, once you're out on Civilian Street, you're still grinding. You're still like working hard, but no one really understands what you're doing or what you're about. And that calibration during that 1 or 2 years can be a bit difficult. Did you guys face that or no?
Oh yeah. I think the biggest challenge, especially when getting out, I mean, personally, I actually had to go to my ADJ directly and tell him that I had 2 months left in my contract before, like, they didn't even realize. So, like, it was, I walked in there, I'm like, should I be doing something? Like, are there meetings or, like, there's something that I need to do? And they quickly offered me a new contract and I turned it down. I wanted to get out, but I had 6 months of work worth of preparation that I'm supposed to go through that I got jam-packed into 2 months, and it actually came out in my benefit because when I talked to the VA, there was one person getting out, me. There was one representative from the VA directly there, so it was like, we need to get you, let's go. And they just started throwing paperwork at me, and I'm like, sign. I didn't even know what I was applying for. I was basically applying for everything. But because I did that, my transition out in terms of, financial coverage and making sure that I had a doctor in place and making sure I had, the basics to transfer into civilian life or veteran life, I should say. I really keep making that mistake. Anyway, into life as a veteran, I got lucky because that was covered. And then I made, I went to my therapy appointments and I went to school and I went to do it. So everything was covered off, but I wasn't making the connection. I wasn't ready really going, okay, you know what? I'm no longer a soldier. I'm no longer Master Corporals. I'm no longer this guy. I'm up until the point that I was ready to make that choice. And I think, again, that's why I was talking about an out camp earlier, was the fact that once you get out, I mean, I know lots of dudes that got out on a whim, right? I don't like this shit anymore. 6 months, VR, let's do this, right? And they just left completely unprepared. And they just, checked all the boxes and walked out. That was it. Bye-bye. See you later. And they came back with lots of problems because obviously they weren't prepared for it. But as everybody's saying, it's all about us. You have to put the work forward in order to get anything, right? Whatever you want, you have to actually go after it continually. I look at Corey. He's one of the leaders in the veteran community. He's working 2-3 jobs now. You got Corey?
Yeah, about 3 full-time jobs.
3 full-time, plus being a dad.
Plus a few other jobs, yeah.
Plus a couple other, yeah. So, if you're prepared for it and you're willing to do it and you're ready, you will. And I think a lot of us, we don't we're not really ready when we leave. We're ready. We don't want to do this shit anymore. Like, we don't want to do this anymore, but we're not really ready to like step into that realm. And it's a very,
We believe we are, though.
We believe we are, absolutely. And this is where, you know, it gets really challenging, because we come from a place of sanctuary, right? We find sanctuary in the teams, in the military, in like, we find ourselves there. We grow up, we're like, yeah, I'm going to be a soldier, and you become a soldier, and you're like, this is me, this is who I am, this is everything that I want to be. And as you said, Seb, the best thing you can do is be other things as well, right? You can be a martial artist, you can be a great cook, you can be a whatever. You have something else in your life that you can actually enjoy. And so I'm going to postulate this last little statement here, and then we can carry on talking. I only have about 2 hours, and we're already an hour and a half in. This has been just a amazing conversation. So this is my postulation. If we exude the idea that it is more important to find yourself in your service, in whatever it is you're serving in that moment, finding yourself there, to be truly in that service, that's a greater position to be in than putting service before yourself, right? So that and I'm going to explain it here in a second, is that if I put everything into being a soldier, if I put my whole heart and soul and love it every day, as you said, Seb, you know, you loved the teams and being with the people, and you find yourself in that service, you are who you're meant to be. That's a great thing. But if you put yourself behind that and you just rely on the service, you're going to come out in a much more negative environment than you would if you were to find yourself in it. And then that way, once you're no longer there, you can find yourself in a different type of service, or in a different type of thing, like Matt found himself in the kitchen, right? I found myself on the back of a horse. You know, people are finding themselves everywhere, and they're finding those missions and finding who they truly are in what they're doing. And I think that's an important postulation. What do you guys think?
Actually, I'd like to add something to that. Or go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add that the motto, similar to what you're saying, should be the work is the reward. And you find that benefit in the work that you do, whether it be on the jiu-jitsu mat, whether it be one of the many businesses that you run, that passion that you find, you're getting that reward from the work that you're doing, serving the community. Whatever benefits come from afterwards is the outcome of that work. But the work is really what you should enjoy, and that reward that you get from it, and being able to do it. For example, seeing Seb training the next generation of warrior on the mats for the next ERT team going through, or, you know, there's a lot of good takeaways, what Shaun was saying earlier, and becoming that intellectual ninja, that generation of intellectual gunfighters. That's how you get to that next level, that passage and transfer of knowledge, information, and Shaun being kind of that mentor with a few years ahead of us, passing on that info, that work being the reward, I think is a really fitting motto for all of us.
Yeah, for sure. That's 100% on that. And, you know, I think one other little piece to add to this is, you know, I still don't have it figured out. You know, I thought I had a lot of things figured out, and then things just figured themselves out a little bit differently. And that's why I've had a few different careers. And Seb can add his 2 cents on this. But, man, I was retired. I retired for 3 days, and then Seb came along. and you know what? I couldn't be happier for it. It's a blessing that Seb did come along, because he inspired me to take up another kind of new mission. And if not for this, then, you know, I'm not sure what I would be doing. I would be doing what I usually do, but this is so much more important, so much more fulfilling. And so I guess I'm mentioning this to have the overarching theme being, you know, you should try to find your passion. You should try to feel your pull, but it's not ones and zeros. It's not a digital solution. It is something that has a bit of ebb and flow to it. And right about the time that you think you've got your passion piece figured out, guess what? It takes you in a different direction, and one that doesn't negate what you already picked up along the way. You build off of that. And so over the course of decades, it's a if as long as you don't stick to that binary or digital aspect of, oh, it was a fail or it was a win. It's never really that. It's just a building on a foundation, a strong military foundation that allows us all to project forward into the future, still kind of feeling the pull and still chasing that passion piece, but just in different avenues from decade to decade.
Which comes down to self-growth, right? Which we all go through it down the road, right? Because your passion change based on your self-growth, right? Based on your thoughts, and your feeling change based on your thoughts, and so on, right?
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I think one of my earliest failings when I left the military was I thought I had to figure it out pretty quickly, and I thought I was going to latch onto that, and I was going to drive that right off the cliff of success because I thought that's what I was going to do next. But, man, you know, my first career, that computer system engineering piece, that, you know, I was only teaching for 3.5 years, and then I got drawn back out to international private consulting. And anyone who's lived the lifestyle of the military, I can assure you that every single one of them is capable and competent of being flexible in the future for new career paths and new passion plays. I think what we aren't taught, or what I didn't really take away, was it's okay to fail a bunch of times in civilian street, and it's okay not to find the first solution as the only solution. You just got to be as flexible once you leave the military as you are on your day-to-day in the military. We've all got it within us to be extremely successful on civilian street, just not being too entrenched in what we believe the outcome should be, I think, is really key. Yeah, to this round table. This is the first round table I've ever done. In fact, this is the first time I've ever been live on anything. This is kind of pretty interesting to me, but I love it because it's like tying on a new white belt in a new martial art. This is extremely challenging for me. Just setting up the software and setting up all the wires and getting my microphone to work properly. Like, it's kind of fun. It's a new challenge. It's something that you can sink your teeth into and not just do it, but like do it the best that you can. And so, you know, I look at this thing that we're doing right now, and I'm doing my best, but, you know, 10 iterations from now or 100 evolutions from now, I'll be doing it better because, you know, that's what I ask of myself each time. And I think that's goes back or segues back into the discussion that we've just had. And that's regardless of whether you're in the military or out of the military, we've all been taught how to be disciplined and focused and work through the adversity and do the best that you can. And I don't think that should ever change in any aspect of our lives, this roundtable included.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Anybody got any? Oh, go ahead, John.
So when are we getting together again? Because Shaun said multiple times, right? So I'm okay with that.
Well, yeah, you know, the interweb will vote me off, so this might be my last time.
Well, we'll see. I think I'd love to have you on my podcast directly, and then you and I could just sit down and have a chat. I think that'd be awesome. I was just gonna say, does anybody have any final points? Would you want to? You know what? I'll go down the line, and then everybody can add their last little thoughts. I personally think this has been amazing. This has just been a great conversation. I'm super thankful for you guys who've been on here, and we're gonna do another one in a month. It's every second Tuesday, and I'm gonna figure out how to do the group a little bit better, but this is my first iteration of it, so we'll see what happens. So let's start with Matt. You got any final points on the topic?
You know what, I think all that we've talked about and stuff like that, I think the big thing is that you have to develop yourself from square one. I mean, even coming into the forces or even leaving the forces, it's focusing on the depth of yourself, right? You could be the best gunfighter, martial artist, cook, whatever, right? but it's your own personal growth, and what you are developing is you bring that with you, and it's at the point where it's, from what I'm hearing in the discussion, a lot of people are, how do I get this across to someone else of what I've done, what I've experienced, who I am, and that's simple as like teaching another person who you are, right, and expressing and sharing what you are. And I know we're, as a forces, as a community, we are so modest about our abilities and our capabilities and what we've done and been through. We don't share it because we don't want to sound like we're bragging. But if it's education, that's a different thing than bragging and sharing. Yeah. So, and I can't wait for next time.
Agreed. Yeah. Awesome. John?
Well, it's a pleasure. It's fun. I mean, love it by all means. I'm stuck with what Seb said, being in the present, and it's in my mind, it's one of the most hard things to do. I mean, with PTS, being stuck in the past, fearful of the future, wanting to ignore what's going on now. But I agree, it's and it will link with Matt and Shaun and all of us. But it's a beautiful piece. It sounds easy to do when we say it. It's also one of the hardest freaking shit to do, right? Yep. And realizing that, I'll go back to what Chance was saying because I was stuck with that one too. You want to plan for that ranch aspect, right? Realize that you did 3 steps today is fantastic, right? You might be 50 miles away from it, but 3 steps brought you closer, which is a win, right? And maybe one of those steps you fell down, but it's still a freaking win because next time you fall down, you'll get up faster, right? And so on. I think that everything we spoke about is not only military purposes or veteran purposes. I think it's everyone. It's on every field, right? Because you will face challenges constantly. It's the same thing. That's it.
Yeah. 100%, man. That's fantastic. Corey?
Yeah, I'll just highlight a few summary things that I think some key takeaways, really some great discussion points here. The presence of strength being a hard target. I really keyed in on that. Seb, I really appreciate that. It's really awakened a few sparks in my mind here. Being mentally resilient, that really ties in with the mission that we've been focusing on recently, where we've shifted towards helping people with mental health, but also developing their mental toughness. I think it's really important for all of us to showcase what attributes and skills we bring to the cause for that. I think there's a lot of mental health warriors, those intellectual ninjas, and having that purpose that defines you. Also I keyed in on that as well, on you versus your work. So the key point that Seb brought up there, and that intellectual side that we develop, I really like the idea of being an intelligent, articulate warrior of the future. It's past self that you're looking to self-improve upon. It's always our self that we're developing, but others as well that we can help. And that intensity, that really does come with a passion. We got to know when an ebb and a flow is required. It's not always 100% all the time, because that's how you break the machine. But having that ability to ebb and flow, peaks and valleys and those troughs that you focus on. And then that conversation we had about getting out, we're always going to be soldiers, whether it be police officers. In this case, we're all military. You never stop being a soldier. Once a soldier, always a soldier. And Shaun, some excellent skills that soldiers do bring to the civilian forefront. I think a good topic for the future that we can talk about is how do those skills get transitioned for those veterans listening about to transition, or those that are aimless right now, maybe looking for some guidance. And to each their own. That distance doesn't define the journey. Everyone has their own time length and approach to things, and comparing yourself to others isn't necessarily an accurate measurement or metric. What you should be comparing yourself is to where you were yesterday. Are you improving? Have you had a setback? That's fine, but continue forward and keep planning and mitigating those actions that are going to put you back. Work on what it is, and that's where we get into the work being the reward. That daily grind, that's what we're entitled to each day for being alive. I think that should be motivational. That hard work is what you're entitled to, and that's what we should be happy with. And then for my own personal aspect, I'd add in that the importance of going from failure to failure without a lack of enthusiasm. I fail daily, and it might look like success outwardly, like from what people are viewing, but the fact is there's a lot of failure going on, and the key is to continue working and moving forward from failure to failure without that lack of enthusiasm, and keep building and improving. I think those are some big key takeaways that I got from this conversation, and definitely looking forward to the next one. I think it's a great idea. So thanks for putting this together, Chance. And Shaun, I'm glad you got off the old rotary phone and you got yourself hooked in the 21st century. Right. It's great to see you online here in person.
Thank you. Grant, you got any final points?
I was really happy that you put this together. When we did these, how long ago was that we did these before? 2 years ago now?
It was like right at the beginning of COVID, so like early 2020.
There's a lot of good collaboration projects, and we managed to set some pretty good things up to help each other out through those things. So I was really happy to see that somebody took this on and set it up again. Some new faces here as well, so that's really cool too. One of the big things I took away from this conversation, if I have to put it in kind of a conceptual presentation, is, and whenever Seb, you were talking about that again, you want to have your accomplishment bias or whatever there when you get in the military and you want to be recognized. You go to a different place and you want to be recognized. Well, remember the parts of you that enabled you to make those accomplishments in the beginning, and take those with the humility in your new occupation, because you're going to a new battlefield now, so you don't have none of the answers, and failure is a very real thing. So the biggest thing you can do to contribute to your new tribe, if you will, is you want to take all those positive attributes, but then you want to ask all the questions, because you want to bring yourself up to speed to be a strong contributing member of the team. And if you're continually running your head into the wall very hard and very effectively, it helps nobody. But if you're humble enough to ask people for guidance and advice, I mean, it's very much more quickly be integrated into a team. And and I've had that too, where that hasn't always been the case, but I found now doing it now that way, it's very much you get fast tracked in there a lot better if you do that, because not only you're effective, but you're asking the more experienced people for advice, and in turn you become more effective, and then you find your own answers and you find your own perspectives to bring to the team, and they will respect your perspective more if you've already reciprocated and taken their advice first. So that's kind of my takeaway from a lot of this. If I had to give this advice to someone who was kind of, or even myself whenever I was 20 years younger and a lot dumber than I am now.
Yeah, that absolutely. Shaun, you got any final points?
Yeah, just a real quick thank you to everyone for inviting me on, letting me be here. My biggest takeaway from this, there's some great recaps, so I'm not going to dive into any of those points. My biggest takeaway is this, that I learned a lot, not just about each one of you, but kind of more or less on the overarching theme of I'm still trying to learn about the veteran community. I've been out of that game. I kept it at arm's distance for quite some time for my own valid reasons. But now that I'm trying to help out in any way that I can, I find myself spending more and more time listening to people, reading opinions, and trying to get a real good sense of what's going on the streets. And this has probably been the most helpful to me to date. And I've still got a lot to learn, still trying to figure the battlefield, as it were. But I just want to thank each one of you individually for all of the things that you had to say, because it's been really beneficial to me. Last thing I will say, just on a little side piece, John, you were talking about being present and finding a way to, sometimes it's a little difficult to be present all the time. Yeah, me too. But one of the ways that I do it is with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. When I'm on the mats, you don't have much time to think about your mistakes, and you don't have much time to think about the future. You just get to be who you are on the mats in whatever state of mind you're in. It all takes care of itself once you put your foot on the mat. And I would go further to that point and say what I was mainly trying to thrust through on this conversation is we're all already capable of being awesome. The military already taught us how to do that. We just have to apply it in our day-to-day. And when I get up in the morning, I do that with my first cup of coffee. I intentionally make my coffee. I pay attention to how it smells. I cup that coffee throughout the entire cup. As the thermal changes, I'm very aware of what's going on in my coffee cup first thing in the morning. And that's how I try to spend the rest of my day. I don't always do it well, but if I'm not doing it well, 100% the mats will do it for me. So if you're trying to figure it out, look into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on a more frequent basis.
100%. That is.
I'll go fight with Grant in his class at home.
Yeah, by all means, man. Like, the one thing that I've always heard is combat sports don't lie, or you can't lie in combat sports. There's just, it doesn't matter, right? You have the skills you have, or you don't, and that's it. So one of the points that I like to bring up is, I said it earlier. You know, when we were overseas, or when you're doing the job, or when you're doing something, that is being present. Like, I was never more present than when I was swinging the metal detector. That was like, that was it, right? The whole world was right now, right here, and that was all there is to it. And the only thing I've had that is anywhere close to that feeling is being tied in knots by a brown belt. Like, that's like it. You're constantly thinking, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, but it's not about the world. It's, there's a leg. Oh no, he's got my gi. Oh geez, now I'm getting choked. Okay, let's tap and start over. And like, but every time it's just, you're there. You're on the mats, and there's nothing else. Nothing else matters. It's just such an amazing feeling. Yeah, I can't thank you all enough for being on here. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that it's you're gonna struggle against that brown belt for sure, but you're gonna struggle within yourself. So you know, when you put your foot on the mat, you manage to clear your head a little bit. I think of it as my moving meditation. I don't think a whole lot when I'm on the mats. I just interact. But man, if you're not in a good headspace, like if you're having a tough day and you weren't really aware that you were having a tough day, the mats will let you know that your head wasn't on right. That you know, whatever lie you were telling yourself is going to become pretty apparent once you are feeling the pressure of the jiu-jitsu. It's pretty insightful, I think.
It 100% is. It really, it forces you to just, like I said, like you said, like Seb said, like anybody that rolls knows that's all. That's it. There is the mats until you're not on the mats. Everything else is superfluous at that point. But again, I can't thank you guys enough. This has been an absolutely outstanding conversation. I'm going to do this once a month, and I'm super stoked. I just realized this for some reason. I don't know why. Seb's has not been recording. I've been so intent on the conversation. I don't know why, but I'm going to see if I can figure that out later. So I'll see what happens. But again, I'm going to learn from this. I think we've all learned from this. And I can't thank you guys enough. It has been outstanding listening to y'all. It's amazing.
You can't take me. I've got that fire. Yeah, I'm a fighter. So don't try me. Yeah, I'm a one-man army. We no survivors. Yeah, I'm a fighter. Yeah, I'm a fighter. It all comes down to this.